Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome real estate attorney and partner at McLaughlin and Stern, Brad M. Jacobs. So, welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting here.
Yes, thank you so much. So, obviously, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you share with us how your career started and what led you into real estate law?
So I have been practicing law for about 20 years, give or take. I started at this particular law firm as an intern back when our firm was probably a quarter of the size that it is now, and I started my career as a corporate attorney, and I had did some real estate as well, and I found that I was enjoying the real estate side of things much more than I was enjoying the corporate side, in terms of just my, exposure to clients and networking. And, I just found it a little bit more, productive. So about 10, 11 years ago, I made the switch to being a full-time residential and commercial real estate attorney. And I just have found it to be, for me, just more productive doing the real estate work.
Yes. So, as an attorney and being in such a highly specialized yet very competitive and very pressurized area of law, what would you say makes you exceptional at what you do? And what would you say differentiates you from other attorneys and law firms?
So let me kind of answer the second part of that question first. The good thing about McLaughlin and Stern and, being at a general practice firm is, we do a lot of different, practice areas, not just real estate. It's trust and estates, litigation, employment law, kind of, a lot of corporate work.
Yes.
So from a, added value perspective, we're able to provide our clients with a lot more assistance, a lot more detail than, a firm that maybe just does exclusively real estate. So, for example, a lot of my clients are, have estate and tax planning involved with their acquisitions and their sales. So I have the resources to loop in one of my colleagues, one of my partners, to really kind of help structure transactions that some other firms don't have. So it's a really good asset and makes, our firm a lot more, I think, productive to do that. As far as my own work and how I like to think that I differentiate myself from other attorneys, and hopefully most attorneys have the same view I do, is really accessibility and making your clients feel that, they're getting the best service possible, that they're getting, the information that they need to make, smart and wise decisions. I kind of always say that I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell them what they need to hear. And if that means, maybe an investment or a transaction or a particular course of action is not the best route to take, even though they may really want that property, I don't mind telling them that, hey, this isn't, the most prudent decision to make in my view. So I really try to just kind of add that, accessibility, making sure that, they're getting the information they need, and making sure that they don't feel like, that they're asking me stupid questions. I get that all the time. Oh, I just have this is a dumb question. There's no such thing as a dumb question. When you go to an attorney and you hire an attorney, that's you're hiring them because you have questions and you're not expert in that particular field. So I really try to just kind of make them feel as comfortable as possible and be approachable, and, while at the same time not trying to put any pressure on them to make decisions that they may not feel comfortable doing.
Yes. So, what would you say some of your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career? I mean, there's probably been many, but what really stands out for you?
So the biggest thing is, when you kind of graduate law school and you start working, you have this kind of thought in your head, or, that, you want to do one particular area of law because you think it's, for back of a letter, lack of a better word, you think it's cool, you think it's hip, is just to kind of keep an open mind when you
Yes.
start practicing. Don't be afraid to explore other areas that, you think you may be interested in. I mean, I'm a prime example of somebody that thought, corporate law was the end all be all. I graduated law school in 1999 when, all the .com companies were, going crazy, and a ton of, equity offerings and other transactions. And I thought that was my, the best thing in the world. And then as I just started to kind of branch out a little bit, I realized that, the real estate was more for me. So, my advice is really just to kind of keep an open mind. Don't get pigeonholed too early, because you never know how things change.
Yes, absolutely. So, in saying that, you received a BA degree from George Washington University in 1996 and your JD degree from Brooklyn in 1999. So, upon graduating from law school, you joined the firm as an associate in 2006 and became a partner in the firm. So, can you share with us more about your journey of how challenging it was in terms of a transition for you? Because obviously it's different. I know you like studying and whatever, but when you actually end up, going and working in a firm, was it quite challenging for you, or was it just an organic process?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so I graduated in 99, as started as an associate, became a partner here in 2006.
Okay, yes.
The good thing is I had started here as an intern and a summer associate, so I had kind of already had a good feel of the land here, and knowing, a lot of the people that I was going to be working with full time, I had the opportunity to work with on a part-time basis when I was interning here. So that made the transition, pretty easy for me in terms of just, not starting brand new.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of law students that come out, and, you're starting at a firm for the first time, and you're nervous, and you're trying to kind of figure out, what's going on. And I did have the benefit of working here on a part-time basis for about a year and a half while I was in school. And so that certainly helped make things a little easier and a little smoother to transition in.
Yes, and that was also a very smart move, because then at least you get an understanding while you're studying. So that's also
Right,
very
exactly. And I found, one of the issues with law school, and I enjoyed my time in law school, made a lot of great friends, a lot of great professionals, and people that I'm still in touch with, fairly regularly. The problem with any schooling, whether it's med school, law school, or anything, it's, you can only learn so much in the classroom. You have to practice, and you have to, there are things that, you don't learn in law school. And the prime example being, just communicating with clients. I mean, knowing the law is obviously important, and, a huge part of what we do, but, being able to converse with clients and communicate effectively, and, just really kind of understanding what clients are looking for. Not every client is the same, and some people need to be a little bit more, hand holding, and others, are more off, kind of hands off. And so you don't learn that in law school. So that's something that is a skill that, just like any skill, it just takes time to do.
Yes, absolutely. So your focus is primarily real estate in one of the most competitive real estate markets in the world, with no room for error.
The best real estate market in the world.
Yes. So over the years, you must have seen it all with changes in the market, but especially during COVID-19, which has obviously turned our world upside down and inside out. So how has this impacted you in the firm, and what have you had to do to adapt? And can you give us any examples?
So, I participate a lot in various real estate brokerage firm sales meetings, and I teach a lot of broker continuing ed classes. And, the last 4 or 5 months, probably even going back further to this, this past summer, it's remarkable how things have picked up at a rapid pace. This time last year, and literally tomorrow was, St. Patrick's Day, kind of marked my last day in the city for almost 4 or 5 months. But it's remarkable that here we are now, March 16th, 2021, and the market has just rebounded so incredibly strong. And
that's amazing.
I'm not surprised because, I kind of joked earlier that New York City is the best market in the world, but it really is. I mean,
yes.
Number one, it's incredibly attractive. There's so much to do here.
Yes.
Just owning in New York City is a huge perk. And so it's just been crazy. But, over the kind of the lockdown and the last, year, there have been a lot of changes. We've had to adapt in a lot of different areas. And frankly, a lot of that stuff, to some extent is probably overdue in terms of efficiency and making the process go a little easier in terms of just how we, conduct our business and how we transact business. On the flip side, some deals take a little bit longer because you're dealing with, remote situations and exchanging documents. Not everyone's in the room at the same time.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to adjust, but once you start doing it, and I've been doing it, so much over the last 12 months that I really have the hang of it. But frankly, what I miss the most, and it's coming back, is I do miss the in-person closings because,
yes.
I like to, a lot of times it's the first time I'm actually meeting my client in person.
Yes.
And it's just the camaraderie of, of a closing is really nice. So, that's the part that, is certainly has been lacking. But even that has, come back, pretty strong over the last, call it 8 weeks or so. And as people continue to get vaccinated, and as we kind of hopefully turn the corner, permanently with this, I think that, things will fall back into place. But that is one area that I do miss in terms of just, being with people, on a more consistent basis.
And human connection.
The human connection. I mean, listen, I love doing the Zooms and I love, teaching and everything else. But, when I teach live in front of 40, 50, 60 people, it's just more productive and it just feels better than teaching on a Zoom. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. Like you can't
There's no replacement for it, really.
Right, there's no replacement for the human element of anything. And yes, the technology is great. And yes, we're having the Zoom and you're overseas and I'm sitting in my office in Manhattan, but a face-to-face interview, is always better. So
yeah, absolutely.
But it is what it is. And, everybody adapts and everybody manages and we get through it. And, some point in the future, we tell our kids that, or really our grandkids at this point, because, my kids are going through it themselves, but you tell them how crazy it was when in 2020 and 21 and, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So real estate, especially in New York, whether it's commercial or residential, has so many complexities and laws. So can you share with us more about this and what are some of the most critical aspects that people need to know, be it in purchasing or leasing?
Right. Well, on the leasing side, obviously that's a little bit different in terms of just, what your needs are, what your long-term goals are, whether you want to be committed into a space for, 5 to 10 years or whether 3 years is better for you. It's important to know what your needs are, what your clients' needs are, what sort of atmosphere they're looking for. I mean, law firms, we're more of the traditional office setup, individualized offices, a number of conference rooms. A lot of the leasing I do now is really more just kind of this open space, shared, workspace type situations, which is,
Yeah,
you know,
like a WeWork almost.
well, yeah, but also just, when you represent media companies or just other kind of tech businesses, there may be one or two, individual offices, but generally speaking, a lot of it is this kind of shared desk sharing arrangements. So
Yes.
that's always something that becomes, interesting. As far as the residential side of things, when I represent purchasers for the first time, they're just shocked about, especially when people may have bought and sold in other states, they're just shocked about all of the different moving parts that go into a residential deal between management firms, title companies, banks, bank attorneys, law firms. It's pretty remarkable. So people just need to understand that, these deals, there's just so many moving parts,
Yeah,
and
it's not just straightforward.
it's not just, sign here, like on television where, you see a closing on TV and you think it's just, takes 2 seconds. There's just um, so many different things to deal with. And so from that perspective, it's just kind of prepping both, knowledge wise and also the mental preparations for people so that they understand that, there's a lot of things that go into these deals. And of course, just explaining, frankly, all the fees that go into these. I mean, when you buy an apartment for $1 million, all right, you're not just paying $1 million, you're paying the closing costs that go with that. The closing costs on a condominium are certainly different than they are in a co-op, but there's a lot of things that, different fees that are on top of that purchase price. So when I
Yes.
speak to clients for the first time, I always make a point to just make sure, even if the client ends up not using me, I want to be able to say to them, okay, listen, tell me what you're paying, tell me what you're looking to finance so that we can go through the numbers so that you don't get surprised when 3 days before a closing, you get sent a closing statement and you say, what are all these ancillary and additional charges? It's so
Yeah.
important to know that up front. And I stress that, every time I present or speak, I always really stress the importance of that because, the closing costs are so important that it could, and it does, throw off your budgets. I mean, certain expenses kick in at certain price points. And if you weren't aware of certain other closing costs, you may, rethink your budget. So
Mm.
that's something that I really try to focus in on. And I really try to stress with the brokers that make sure that your client knows, not just on the purchase side, but on the sales side, so that they know what they're ultimately going to net in terms of a sales price, and on the buy side, what they're going to be paying out of pocket to buy that particular property.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about leadership and ask you, what do you believe makes your leadership style different as an attorney and as a law practice? And can you give us any examples?
So I think leadership in general is tied directly to approachability
Yes.
and, knowing that somebody can come to you with questions, come to you with issues, and just feel comfortable that they're getting the thought out responses that they're looking for. I tend to micromanage my own work. I do most of the work I do myself. I don't really delegate a lot of stuff because, clients are coming to me. They're not coming to me to then kind of work with a paralegal or work with somebody younger. They want to use me, and I want to, be that resource that they're coming to me for. So, I think that a lot of it with leadership in general is just being approachable, instilling confidence in people, and just making sure that they know that, you're their attorney, that you're their advocate. And, you know, like I said early on in this discussion, that I'm not somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think you need to hear.
Yes.
Whether you ultimately heed my advice or take a course of action that I say, you know, that's ultimately up to the client. You know, I
Yes.
can only tell them what I think and what the law is and what the practical implications are. And if a client decides, hey, listen, I appreciate the advice, but I'm going to take this approach, or I'm going to use this attorney, not saying that my advice is always, you know, 100% accurate. You know, I'm not always right, despite what I try to tell my wife and kids. I do, you know, make mistakes, and my opinion and my views aren't, you know, the end all be all of the world. But again, the point is just to make sure that your clients have that comfort level that, okay, listen, you know, 10 years after they bought that apartment or bought that property, and then they're going to sell, that the first thought is, hey, you know, I'm going to reach back out to Brad. He was my attorney when we bought. He was a great lawyer. He was really helpful. I'm going to use him again. So,
Yes.
you know, or, you know, again, going back to the point of having a general practice firm is saying, you know, I did somebody's real estate deal, and now they're coming back to do their estate planning, or
Yes.
maybe they got laid off and they need somebody to look at a severance agreement, or, you know, a corporate transaction. So you really want to, the point is to kind of leave an indelible impression on somebody, a client, and knowing that, you know, they had a great experience. And that's why it's so important, not just for me to make sure that I'm accessible and doing my job, but to make sure that the people around me at the other kind of aspects of a transaction are really doing their job as well, because ultimately it reflects on me. And, you know, the last thing I want to have is an unsatisfied client.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about maintaining long-term relationships with people.
Exactly. I mean, I look at closings, you know, as the first step in developing, you know, a long-term relationship, and it's worked really well with a lot of clients. I mean, some clients it's just been a one and done deal, but, you know, a lot of my, you know, ancillary work that either I'm doing or have colleagues working on, you know, estate planning and things like that, are initiated with the initial closing.
Yeah.
So it's all about just making sure that your client is comfortable with you and knows that they're getting the service that they're signing up to pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you are in residential and commercial, which we've already mentioned, you have achieved so much within your career, and as a result, the firm has the largest and best known trust department in New York City. So, how did you manage to achieve this, and what are some of the biggest mistakes you have seen made in real estate that could have been prevented?
Right. So as far as the trust and estates work goes, that's been a huge part of my own practice, as I said, in terms of my own clients being able to have the resources for, you know, estate and tax planning that is, you know, very crucial in these deals. And then also just kind of knowing the nuances of when you represent an estate or when you buy from an estate, kind of knowing all the issues that are involved, knowing the practical side of things, how things operate.
Yes.
As far as mistakes that people make, I can't really pinpoint one specific mistake, but I think it's really just, you know, goes and ties to communication. You know, I think
Yes.
lack of communication is probably the worst thing that you can do, or have. And listen, if you make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, nobody's perfect, is really just owning it and saying, listen, yes, something may have happened, and, you know, we take responsibility. We're going to now fix it. We're going to try to game plan to maneuver things. I think that goes, you know, a long way, as opposed to just kind of taking the immediate kind of defensive, you know, defensive approach where you become argumentative. I think that, you know, especially young attorneys may not always want to accept that, you know, constructive criticism is probably the best thing that you could ask for in early on in your career. You know, writing styles, communication styles, just, you know, the only way you're going to learn and the only way you're going to get better is, you know, by listening to what people are telling you. And, you know, it's okay to admit that, you know, hey, yes, maybe I could have conveyed that message a little differently, or maybe I could have been a little clearer on this. You know, and even 20 years into practicing, I'm always open to suggestions and you know, productive conversations and constructive criticism, because, you know, there's no point in your life or your career where that's not important. You know, it kind of goes to the whole, you know, kind of the analogy of parenting. You know, you know, my kids, my oldest child is 13. I'm 46. You know, I always tell my kids, you know, there's never anything that you can't ask me or your mommy. You know, it's just, that's what parents are there for. I'm 46. I still go to my parents from time to time to get their perspective on things. There's no shame in that. And it's just in the professional world, you know, if you have a question, you want to bounce something off somebody, do it. That's why you have partners. That's why you have colleagues. And, you know, always feel that you can, you know, look for input, look for insight, because ultimately that's far more productive than just trying to kind of have an ego and not looking for help or insight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we need to change this narrative of, you know, negative associations to people asking questions or, you know, failing and making mistakes, because that's the only way you learn. So
exactly. I mean, listen, like I said, I switched careers 10 years into practicing, and, you know, I'm still learning, even though I, you know, consider myself to be very good at what I do, but there's always new things to learn, always.
Yeah.
So you just got to be willing to accept that and learn from mistakes and be willing to have an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So in saying that, what have been some of your biggest career highlights?
So I guess that's a good question. I think that, again, on a kind of 10,000 foot general perspective, what I think I'm most, you know, happy with over the last several years is, you know, just kind of building up a reputation, especially in the residential world, where, you know, people come to me, you know, for, you know, continued advice, being asked to present at meetings, classes, things like that, just kind of establishing a reputation of being, you know, one of the more sophisticated attorneys in my area, especially on the residential side. I have a lot of colleagues and friends that do what I do, and I work with some unbelievable, not just at my firm, but colleagues who do a lot of residential work that I kind of have a lot of deals with, because it becomes a very small world. And, you know, it's really it becomes a very small world very quickly, but just kind of having the reputation of, oh, you know, Brad's on this deal, you know, and hopefully the other attorney or the other brokers knowing that, you know, it's hopefully going to be a smooth deal and it's going to work well, you know, not somebody that is difficult or argumentative or is going to, you know, sabotage a deal, but, you know, work to brainstorm to make sure it happens. And, you know, if issues come up, to be able to kind of game plan accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maneuver, because there's always issues that come up at the 11th hour. You know, I try to diffuse as much as possible before a transaction closes, but things happen, you know, and just trying to be practical and not taking a defensive approach, but taking a productive approach, because ultimately that's, you know, how these things, you know, succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And also taking the emotion out of it, because I think people are already emotional in these processes of spending so much money.
Right. I mean, you know, it's, you know, kind of laugh, but part of our job as attorneys is part therapist, you know.
Yes.
just trying to calm clients down. The good thing about real estate, unlike say litigation or matrimonial, where it's just constant combat and constant,
Yes.
one upping the other. I do think real estate tends to be a little bit more of a collaborative type effort where, seller wants to sell, buyer wants to buy, everybody has a common goal, get to a closing, 90 out of 90, let's say 98 of 100 closings go, and it's just a lot of, chit-chatting, joking around. It's not this, wanting to kill each other. I mean, that certainly has happened. I've had some pretty wild stories over the years, which fortunately are few and far between. But the point being that, certain areas of law are just by their nature more, prone to, emotion. And real estate certainly has its own set of emotions, but a different type of emotion than the, I want to kill you type of emotion.
Yes.
I like that better because the collaborative team effort, it just makes the deals go smoother.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did touch on it a bit earlier, but as you lecture on the nuts and bolts of transactions, can you share with us more about this and how do you balance such a highly demanding career and family life?
So the classes that I teach, I teach a number of different continuing ed type classes, some dealing with nuts and bolts of estate sales, other dealing with, just representing buyers and sellers, closing costs. For me, that's a huge part of my marketing, getting out and, trying to impute as much information from my own experiences that I possibly can. I love it. I would teach every week if I had the opportunity, and obviously I have work to do, so that's not always, practical, but I really enjoy teaching. And obviously live teaching is, as we said, the human element is a little better than teaching on Zoom, but it is what it is for the time being.
Yes.
You just make it work. My wife is a teacher, so I think that a lot of that is probably wearing off on me in terms of, just watching her teach and watching her teach on Zoom, especially the last year, picking up some info from her. And I enjoy it. It's just a great marketing tool for me, and it's just a great way to meet people. So, I do it as much as I can, and, it's fun to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that leads me to the last two questions. What are the three key pieces of advice you would give to others looking to pursue a career in real estate law or law in general? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
So on the advice situation is, let me just give this a little bit of thought, a little bit more thought. I think number one, as I kind of alluded to, is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Digest as much information as you can. Keep up with current law changes. Things change all the time, as we know, not just in real estate, but all areas of the law. So just really, be willing to kind of be a sponge, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
The second thing is really just be prepared. That to me is a really important thing. Is, when I go to a closing, all it takes is one party to that transaction to, who's unprepared, to really put a cog in the line and, slow things down. So just be prepared. Obviously, as I said, certain things come up at the last minute that people aren't anticipating, and that's fine. But to the extent that things can be addressed and should be addressed, that's just so important. So that would probably be the second thing I would say. And then the last thing just all ties back to communication and, making sure that your clients when they're coming to you and coming to you for advice, you're not going to them for advice. They're paying you to be their advisor. Is just to listen to what they're saying, you know, understand what their concerns are. Just because you have a perspective on something, you know, the client may have a totally different perspective on something that you weren't thinking about. So, you know, don't go in with this preconceived, you know, it's my way or the highway type of situation, the type of view. You really have to listen and understand what the client is looking for and what they're trying to accomplish. And it may not always work out. And as I said, you know, you don't tell people what they want to hear. You tell them, you know, what they need to hear.
Yes.
And, you know, just be a good communicator. So those are the three things that I would suggest. And, you know, that of course leads into a legacy, which is, you know, kind of practicing what I preach, right?
Yes.
You know, being known as an attorney that, you know, is there for his clients, has a great reputation among his peers, and just being known as just a good guy and a good attorney. And, you know, that's, after that, you know, you can't control everything, but you can control a lot of things. And
Yes.
how you present yourself and how you handle situations is, you know, a huge part of what somebody's legacy is. I mean, we see that in all aspects of life.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for your time today. So if people would like to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
So I assume this will probably end up on LinkedIn, which is great.
Yes.
Please send me a LinkedIn request. I try to use LinkedIn a lot, not just for my own conveyance of information, but to find out what other people are working on and picking up on other things. So please, you know, send me a LinkedIn request, or you can obviously email me. You can go to the McLaughlin Stern website and look me up. My email address, which maybe you can post on the LinkedIn page.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, just reach out, even if you have counsel or you work with somebody already. I always tell people whenever I present or teach, you know, I try to be a resource. So if you just need to bounce something off me or you're not sure about something, you know, even if I'm not on the deal, and obviously I know I don't get a big deal, but, you know, look me up, and I'm happy to try to help in any way I can.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brad. And hopefully we can have you back in the future.
I would love to. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and glad we got to do this. And I know it's probably getting a little late where you are, so I'll let you probably, guys getting around dinner time. So yeah, this was great. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.